you like the dip in the book?
Yeah, everything on my
There's
phone.
something I really like, and you may find interesting. They have it in here too, but
You guys were in South Dakota or something?
and like,
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And they out, so they go back and forth.
But they can.
then you have Luther's morning prayer. You guys might find that interesting. It's up there in the bottom. They put this one right there, for example, let's run this. Yeah, artist quickly, 3/26 in the week, sometime about the next quarter or whatever. Go to the church calendar.
She's got your CD. This is a friend that I have for 5 years.
You'll have to ask her there. Colorado Springs now.
We're about to Colorado. Well, been there, dark as gods. Place
Nice to be fair.
yeah. Yeah. Been all over the.
Yeah, very nice. I live with my daughter and son. Very nice.
But it's quite. There's another very, an acquaintance who's a professor of philosophy. Yes, you get to be all right.
Parsons.
Right. Now there's a I think he lives just between. Yeah, Lee Strobel, exactly, yeah. Yeah, sure, I don't know him personally, but I met him. Did you get my name?
We share.
Okay. I got one. Should we get that dollar?
Apologetic, organization where?
Well, yeah, I'm on the board of a project.
Oh, Charlotte? Okay. There's a good guy in San Luis.
Yeah,
His name?
he's still got a program on television. John Hanson.
Yeah. Actually, it's in Asian.
You ever heard of it?
Yeah. She all right?
Yeah, that's where I am.
Okay.
I've been doing this for 45 years. When I retired, I went to California and was their CEO of movement from Los Angeles to Charlotte. And then when I retired, I said,
Okay.
we both.
Grab.
Where'd you retire from?
The last thing I retired from was selling information. Before that, I retired. First time I retired from manufacturing trusses. And then I also retired from investment management of real estate. And then finally I retired from commission sales.
Where were you here?
Yeah, I've been based in Atlanta, although I had offices in Dallas and Florida.
Extra second. Think through. We received it.
So you went off the gospels and stuff?
Yeah, I met Guy Schroeder, he had Southern Baptist Seminary. He had a very interesting encounter with him. He had a guest seminary. He and me very knew each other quite well. But Dr. Geisler was a dispensation.
Well, that's from the BTS background. He called 30 years.
Right. I was in his home. The guy who succeeded him.
The house of Saul had reigned in Israel for many years, for decades in fact, but always did so underneath a pall that was announced by the prophet Samuel that God was going to tear the kingdom from the hands of Saul and give it to someone better than him. And we, of course, beginning of middle of the book of 1 Samuel, we realize that person is David, the son of Jesse. Today, we're going to hear about the last battle of the house of Saul. You'll want to keep in mind a few of the players on this family tree. You'll see Saul and his cousin Abner, who's the chief of the army, and then his sons, Jonathan, the great friend of David, Ishvi and Malchi-Shua, and his daughters Merib and Michael will play again later. And we remember the house of David, that today the only one we'll really have to worry about here is just David himself, so we won't spend much time looking at that. But today we're going to take a look at the final battle of King Saul. So you want to open your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 28. 1 Samuel chapter 28. And we got a page number in the Pew Bibles?
464.
465. All right. Chapter 28, verse 1. In those days, the Philistines gathered their forces to fight against Israel. Achish said to David, "You must understand that you and your men will accompany me in the army." David said, "Then you will see for yourself what your servant can do." Remember, David's been on the run, living the life of a desperado. At one point, he went over and pretended to be part of the enemy, but every time that he said he was going to go raid against Israel, he would go raid against somebody else. But now all of a sudden, it seems as if problems are going to happen because David is now the personal bodyguard of this Philistine ruler, and they're going to war together against the people of Israel. So David says, "You're going to see what your servant can do." "Very well, I will make you my bodyguard for life." We'll find out later on in this battle that the Philistine war chiefs, when they saw David lined up for battle, they said, "We don't trust this guy. He's slain his Saul slew his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. No way." And so he ends up, by the grace of God, David sent back away from the battle so he doesn't have to fight against the Israelites. But let's find out what happened in between there. Verse 3. Now, Samuel was dead, and all Israel had mourned for him, and buried him in his own town of Ramah. Saul had expelled the mediums and spiritualists from the land. The Philistines assembled and came and set up camp at Shunem, while Saul gathered all the Israelites and set up camp at Gilboa. When Saul saw the Philistine army, he was afraid. Terror filled his heart. He inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him by dreams, or by Urim, or prophets. Then Saul said to his attendants, "Find me a woman who is a medium, so I may go and inquire of her." "There is one in Endor," they said. So Saul disguised himself, putting on other clothes, and at night he and 2 men went to the woman. "Consult a spirit for me," he said, "and bring up for me the one I name." Interestingly enough, the story of the witch of Endor. What are parts about this piece of artwork that you like, or parts that you don't like? Art is about in the eye of the beholder, of course, but what do you think? What about it makes sense to you in the story as far as you know it? Anybody? Lanji, maybe hit the light switches right next to you. See them on the wall there? Lean a little forward. Maybe that'll help people see it.
There's a lot of people in that picture.
Okay, there's a lot of people. Who's in the picture? Can we identify the people in it?
There's the witch, there's Saul, there's Saul's wife.
Dude looks like a lady. Yeah. Dude looks like a lady there. So remember it said he went with 2 men. He took 2 men with him. So those are 2 of his. Probably one is Abner. Probably Abner, and maybe another one of his maybe the person who knew where to find the witch of Endor, I guess, right? What else? What do you notice about the figure of King Saul?
He's like reaching towards, he's like bowing.
He's bowing.
Reaching.
Yep. We're going to find out that he bows down. Of course, the guy on the right is good. Do we know this story? Do we know who this is going to be? Samuel, right? So he's bowed down before Samuel. What else do you notice about King Saul? He's big. Yeah, he's huge. Yeah. Remember, he was Israel's giant. Israel still had a giant. He was a big man, 10 inches taller than the tallest man in Israel. And he was, again, what we hear about him when he came up against the Philistines is that he was afraid, terrified. Worst thing in the world is to have a giant who's afraid to fight, isn't it? I mean, that's what he's supposed to do. Like if you're keeping a cave troll someplace, you kind of want him to come out swinging. But Israel's cave troll is not coming out swinging. Saul disguised himself, putting on other clothes. At night, he and 2 men went to the woman. Consult the spirit for me, he said, and bring up for me the one I name. But the woman said to him, surely you know what Saul has done. He has cut off all the mediums and spiritists from the land. Why have you set a trap for my life to bring about my death? Saul swore to her by the Lord, as surely as the Lord lives, you will not be punished for this. Then the woman said, whom shall I bring up? Bring up Samuel, he said. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out at the top of her voice and said to Saul, why have you deceived me? You are Saul. The king said to her, don't be afraid. What do you see? The woman said, I see a spirit coming up out of the ground. What does he look like? He asked. An old man wearing a robe is coming up. Then Saul knew it was Samuel, and he bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. And Samuel said to Saul, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? Okay. Let's take a look at some questions here. All right, so this is some things. Let's talk about witches. In your groups, you're going to talk about the first section here of this account of the witch of Endor. You can talk about whatever you'd like, but again, maybe some things to think about. Why is verse 3 an important lead-in? Comparison between Saul and David. Some irony, and what options do we have? When I say what are the 3 options about what happened at Endor, is I want you to think about what are the 3 possibilities of what this Samuel apparition is. I think there's 3 possibilities. Maybe you'll come up with more. But so you can talk to whomever you want to, but make sure you start out by introducing yourself again to the people, even if you've been sitting with them forever. Hi, my name is John. I'm the pastor here, and ready, set, go. We're in.
I'm reading about her life, and she's
This is I didn't either until I started looking at it.
I've never used that. I've always used
And if you notice, there's a giant bush on the ad, and right on the ones they have, they follow that tradition. Like in today's reading. I don't know that it's accurate, but my understanding that Sarbanes real name is God or perhaps
Yes, exactly.
There's not a tradition. But then, the reason we have these different translations. So I'm
Maybe 1 minute or so, finish up what you're talking about.
What do you think this is?
What did you talk about? What rabbits did you chase? Did anybody talk about any of these questions? Tell me something your group talked about. What do you think, Jamie Grace?
The interesting thing, I think, is the woman's reaction when she sees Samuel, but shouldn't she have recognized Samuel's name?
Is it? Yeah, her reaction's interesting. She cries out. What can we deduce from that?
It was terrifying.
Something was scary.
Yeah,
And then that maybe some other things we could deduce from that.
she's a good actress.
She might be a good actress.
This sort of thing doesn't usually happen.
Maybe this sort of thing doesn't usually happen. Yeah, those are, I think, 3 good things that you go, okay, well, it seems like something's out of the ordinary for her. Well, that's true. Maybe this is all a really good ruse. What was the third one? Jamie, what was yours?
Demonic fear.
Fear, maybe of demonic fears. Okay. What else did you guys talk about?
That would explain why she's paranoid when the prophet shows up. If she's demonic, it's like, uh-oh.
Well, okay, right. If she's demonic and Samuel comes back from heaven, okay.
No, I'm done for. Yeah.
I'm done for, yeah.
Okay. Go back to the beginning. What's a witch? I mean, I guess I always thought there wasn't a witch.
In Endor?
No, I don't believe in witches. Like,
How does the Bible define a witch?
yeah.
A medium or a spiritist is how the Bible actually talks. The Witch of Endor kind of comes from the Old King James Version, and we kind of hold on to that. So a medium would be someone who claims to be able to talk to spirits. You're a medium, so I want to talk to Uncle Louie. And so I go to a medium, and she starts contacting Uncle Louie, who's dead, and I talk through her to my uncle. That's a medium. A spiritist is someone who says that they have ability to work with spirits. And a witch would be a female person who deals with the occult and with sorcery. And a male one would be called a warlock. So now Dawn's asking, are witches flying around on broomsticks? It is the season, yeah. No, we don't believe that witches fly around on broomsticks. We believe that there are people who work in the occult and try to use the power of the devil to do things. Yes, yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Good question. Interesting. Go ahead, Joanne.
My thought on the Samuel coming back, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can do that.
Okay, can you do that? Joanne's going, can you do that? What do you think, Ruth?
Well, so it's not logical that a witch or somebody who's in the occult has the power over death. Only God does. So if she truly saw Samuel, it wasn't because of anything she did, although it might look like it.
Okay, we're starting to come to some of our some of our choices. Chris, you saying something?
Oh, I was talking to her.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
No, I was just saying, why would God use, I guess, an evil pathway?
Okay.
That doesn't make sense to me, so.
All right, so let's get what are our three options, three or more options? What's some options about what's going on here? Jamie Grace.
The options we came up with was that it was a demonic spirit, not Samuel in any way.
Okay, demon, not Samuel.
It might have been Samuel sent down from heaven by God to talk to Saul for one last time, maybe.
Okay.
The third option was that it was an angel disguised as Samuel.
Angel disguised as Samuel. All right. Anybody else? Another one? Bonji.
You know, a lot of supposed mediums and things like that were tricksters. You know, they would fool you and things like that.
Yeah, tricksters, hoaxsters. Yeah, a lot of mediums and spiritists are just that. It's like astrology. You know, they write something that, you know, today you will get hungry in the afternoon because you're a Taurus. Yeah. Another one?
Vision, maybe?
Vision, or I mean, the one that we haven't said yet that is a possibility, or that we have to account for as a possibility, is that the medium
She conjured up Samuel.
right? And maybe we want to reject that one out of hand, but of course, why do we have to write that one down to talk about it? Because the biblical text is kind of like, let's write it down and we'll talk about each one. This is medium conjures Samuel. Okay, we're going to talk about those 5 choices in our next breakup, but maybe a couple of things for us to note. Why is 1 Samuel 28:3 an important introduction to this section?
What makes it clear that Samuel died?
Samuel's gone. Saul has no connection to Samuel anymore. Also, the nice introduction that, oh yeah, by the way, the mediums and spiritualists, Saul outlawed them all.
Yeah.
So it just shows his hypocrisy of, you know, that he had outlawed them all. But it's his desperation, because what does he try to do before the battle?
Consult God.
Yeah, he tries to inquire of the Lord, and God didn't answer him either by prophet or by vision or by Urim. You know what Urim means? The Urim and Thummim, yeah. So in the ephod of the high priest's, the high priest's ephod had a place for the Urim and the Thummim, which were 2 things, we're not really sure exactly what they are, that were given by God in the Exodus, by which people could inquire of the Lord. Now, before we get too deep into how they did that, I don't know. People used to say, like, well, it was like casting lots. One was yes and one was no. But sometimes when you inquire of the Lord, and they use the Urim and the Thummim to say, where's Saul? And it says, he's in the baggage, which is not a yes or a no question. So we don't know exactly how. But so Saul, again, lost the Urim and the Thummim when he killed all the priests at Nob, and the Abiathar left with the ephod. So who's got the ephod, the Urim and the Thummim? David. Who's got a prophet named Gad? David. Who's got the priesthood? David. And who has God speaking to him still through the Spirit? David. You're seeing this stark contrast all of a sudden between the house of Saul and the house of David. How about the irony you see in verse 10? Right?
Swears by God.
He swears by God, which is great, because he's not going to God for answers. And of course, how does he describe the God he's swearing to? The living God, while Saul's actively trying to inquire of the dead. Yeah, it just shows how morally and spiritually bankrupt Saul had become. Yeah. All right. Next section, I'm going to read what happens. Yes.
I think it's interesting that she's worried about getting killed because she's medium.
Mm.
He says, well, as the Lord lives, I won't kill you. So she takes that and says, okay, good.
Yeah, or even anybody else get struck by this, that Saul had banished all mediums and spiritists from the land. Saul said, find me a witch. And some guy goes, oh, there's one in Endor. Did he have to look real hard? No, he didn't have to look real hard. Maybe this was someone that was, again, maybe this is a dynasty that had completely lost its way, and not just the king, but his courtiers were also not inquiring of the Lord. They knew exactly where to find a witch. All right, let's look at 2 Samuel chapter 28, starting with verse 15. Well, I'll start at 14. What does he look like, he asked. An old man wearing a robe is coming up. Then Saul knew it was Samuel and bowed down and prostrated himself, his face to the ground. He's acting like he treats this apparition like it's God, right? Because this, of course, has taken the place of God in his life. Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? I am in great distress, Saul said. The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has turned away from me. He no longer answers me, either by prophets or by dreams. So I have called on you to tell me what to do. Samuel said, why do you consult me now that the Lord has turned from you and become your enemy? The Lord has done what he predicted through me. The Lord has torn the kingdom of your neighbors and given it to torn the kingdom from your hands and given it to one of your neighbors, to David, because you did not obey the Lord or carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites. The Lord has done this to you today. The Lord will hand over both Israel and you to the Philistines tomorrow, and you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also hand over the army of Israel to the Philistines. Immediately Saul fell full length on the ground, filled with fear because of Samuel's words. His strength was gone, and he had eaten nothing all day and night. When the woman came to Saul and saw, so when she came to him, that means the implications that during the vision process she was away, maybe in another room, maybe behind a curtain. That might lend, for people that take Lanchi's approach of hoax, that might be something you guys talk about in your group, saying, is this just part of the thing? Woman came back, saw he was greatly shaken, and she said, let me give you some food so that you may eat. He refused. He said, I won't eat. But his men joined the women in urging him, and he listened to them, and he got up from the ground, and he sat on the couch. The woman butchered the calf, and then she set it before Saul and his men, and they ate, and that night they left, or that same night they got up and left. All right. I had 3 options. You guys have now gotten 5 options of what this is. In your groups, come to a decision on which of the 5 it is. Is this a demon, not Samuel? Is this Samuel sent by God? Is this an angel disguised as Samuel? Is this a hoax? Or is this the medium conjuring Samuel up from the grave? All right, and we want to be able to defend your answers. If you have questions, I'll be walking around. Let's take 5 or 6 minutes on this. Ready, set, go. So you know where we're at. We're in 1 Samuel 28, where the witches are conjures up Samuel. And we're determining which of these 5 choices the person that they're talking about is. So we're looking at the text and what's happening and doctrine and all that other good stuff to try to decide who was that person that medium was involved with.
We're in 1 Samuel, which chapter?
28. One more minute. Who wants to make an argument? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What did you land on? Or against an argument, you say, I hate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anybody? What do you think, Lanji?
I'm taking hoax off the list, because if it was a hoax, I think she would have given Saul a little bit more positive feedback.
Okay, that's an interesting thing. If it's a hoax, it seems like she would have given him something a little different than that. It's kind of like you open your fortune cookie and it says something momentous is going to happen to you today. It never says something terrible is going to happen to you today. Okay, yeah, Chris?
We were talking about that the Bible wouldn't say it was Samuel if it wasn't Samuel.
Okay, that's an interesting question, right? What? So some people would say, was this Samuel? Simple answer is yes, because the Bible calls it Samuel, right?
We thought that it might be a demon or Satan because of the parable of Lazarus. You don't go back and forth. And why did he come up? And would his sons and Saul be with Samuel in heaven the next day? I don't think so.
I think that's going to be a really interesting thing that we're going to get to if we say, yes, it's Samuel. We have to account for a couple of things. We'd have to account for how does this person get there? How does Samuel get there? Does this counter other doctrines? And then if we say that it's yes, Samuel, are we saying it's yes, Samuel sent by God, or yes, Samuel conjured by the medium? Bob.
Well, we talked about the fact that at the Mount of Transfiguration, you had Moses and Elijah.
Yep.
So there's some precedent there later. The other thing is Jesus, when he encountered the man who had several demons, sent him into the swine. So God has authority over the demons. So our group is that it was Samuel sent by God.
Okay, good. Robert?
Yeah.
Same thing?
Same thing. Yeah.
Same thing, okay.
Well, there's no reason why we should not say it's Samuel.
Yeah, well,
No reason.
I think the only thing we would say then is if we say it's Samuel, we have to account for his words, because God has said any true prophet, if his prophecy comes from the Lord, his words must be upheld. So then if we say Samuel, Then we're going to have some, Lucy, you got some explaining to do, what happens with the words that he said and the outcome. But we'll come back to that.
I was wondering if it was more of the medium conjures Samuel's body, but not his soul. Like his soul never left heaven, but because he was a prophet in life, his corpse could still emit prophecy.
I had not thought of that one. We need to put that one. The question that Josh had is, could it be his corpse still had the ability to emit prophecy, and the medium conjured up the corpse, not Samuel? That one I would put definitely on the probably on the further out spectrum, because I can't think of other examples where we could get that. But that's interesting.
Them being Samuel saying, "You will be with me." In those days, Paradise and Hades were basically in the same place with the abyss in between.
Sure. So, in other words, when he says, "Your sons will be with me," about addressing Sharon's point, does he just mean you're going to be dead? Yeah. You're going to be in Sheol. And Sheol just meant you're going to, like we'd say, tomorrow you're going to be in the grave. Now, we might say that about somebody, know that their soul's going to be in heaven, but you're going to be in the grave tomorrow with me. Yep. So that's an interesting one. Jim.
So, the Bible says, the Bible names it Samuel. Mm-hmm. But how do they define Samuel?
Well,
she says, Saul says, "For what do you see?" He says, "Conjure Samuel for me." And she says, "You deceive me." He says, "Well, what do you see?" "I see an old man in a white robe coming up out of the ground." And Saul says, "Well, that's Samuel." So
that is another argument that
this is Saul defining him, that vision, as Samuel.
This is an argument a lot of people take, that this is Scripture's telling this from the perspective of the medium, and specifically from the perspective of Saul. In fact, when you get the perspective of the medium, you take a look at what she says. She cries out at the top of her voice, and then it says, "I see a spirit." You see the footnote there? What she actually says is, "I see gods coming up out of the ground." Seems like she saw more than one. And then I see an old man in a robe. Yeah. Sharon.
I was just going to say, this might sound a little creepy, but I've had experience with the occult. Mm-hmm. And the demons absolutely can describe to the detail of what the dead mother looks like, or the dead sister. And they can describe them in detail. And it's not them.
Yeah, demons can interact with us in this world, so they would have no problem recalling for example, what Samuel and Saul had said to each other beforehand.
And like the girl that followed Paul, mm-hmm. She was shouting out the truth.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. On the yes side, for the Bible says it's Samuel, then you look at what he says, and kind of the words that he speaks are very in line with Samuel's usual prophecy. But we have to remind ourselves that the Bible says, well, the devil can masquerade as an angel of light too. So I really think the place we're going to have to go is, do the words of this apparition carry the same attributes as a word from God, or not? Right? I think what I would say is, how about number 5? Medium conjures up Samuel. Anybody agreeing with that one? Good, because I was going to have to disagree with you very publicly. That mediums don't have any power over the dead. When you go to heaven, there's not going to be some weirdo lighting incense and pulling you back to talk about something. That's doesn't work that way. So that one's not an option. We could go hoax, but Lonzie wants to take that off the table. He sees something bigger happening here. So I heard one group saying, Samuel sent by God, demon sent by God. Or a demon, not Samuel. I'm going to take off angel disguised as Samuel, just because I think that would be number 2. God sending a messenger. So of these two then, so we've already talked about some positives towards number 2, which is that, the Bible text that says, well, he says Samuel, and Samuel said, and those things, and those words are kind of in concert with the way Samuel usually spoke. What are some other things for or against number 1 or number 2 that you'd say?
I think if it was number 1, you'd have a different message given to Saul.
Okay, yeah.
It'd be a totally different message from a demonic source that would not be truthful, and it would be deceptive, probably.
Okay, so if it's from a demon, we should look for the message to be deceptive. If it's from God, we should look for it to be truthful. Okay, Ruth?
I was gonna say the same thing, that if it was related to the demon world, there would be a lie in there somewhere.
Okay. Yep, Judy.
But Sharon was talking about the woman that followed Paul. She spoke the truth. She said that,
I mean, demons.
Demons, when they speak the truth, are doing it for the wrong reason. What do you want with us, Son of God? They shouted to Jesus. They weren't trying to spread the message that Jesus was the Messiah.
So perhaps the deception here is just to put Saul in a place of despair.
Interesting. Let's take a look and see what happens. So, turn your page to 1 Samuel 31. So, Saul leaves the place, obviously quite distraught, didn't even want to eat. Goes to verse 31. The Philistines fought against Israel. Israel fled before them, and many fell slain on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines pressed hard after Saul and his sons, and they killed his sons, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchi-Shua. The fighting grew fiercer on Saul. When the archers overtook him, they wounded him critically. He said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through, or these uncircumcised fellows will come and run me through and abuse me." But his armor-bearer was terrified and would not do it. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. Now it's interesting. Saul is critically wounded, but what does he say he needs in order to be dead? He needs a sword blow of some sort, right? You have to stab me through. So he's wounded, but he seems like he could have abandoned the battle, but he didn't. Killed himself. Look below. When the armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he too fell on his sword and died with him. So Saul and his 3 sons and his armor-bearer and all his men died together. Now, all his men, that doesn't mean the whole army. That would have meant the men in Saul's immediate bodyguard there. We can see that because you see below the rest of the army runs away. Israelites along the valley saw that the Israelite army had fled, and Saul and his sons had died. They abandoned the towns and fled. The Philistines came and occupied it. What had the medium, or what had the apparition told Saul was going to happen the next day?
Exactly what happened. That him and his sons would go back.
Okay? Problem is, his sons didn't all die. Ishbosheth was still alive. I don't know what he was doing. He was probably playing polo with the jet set. He wasn't at the battle. In fact, 2 other sons of Saul didn't die. The house of Saul did not end at this battle. Do you know the house of Saul ruled for another 2 years? So the medium said, you and your sons are going to die. Not all of them died. He said, what else did she say? Or Samuel say? He said, the Lord will hand over both Israel and you to the Philistines tomorrow. The next day, hand over the army of Israel to the Philistines. You could read that. If you want to say this is Samuel, you could read that and say, well, when he meant army, I meant the army's going to be lost. Or the army's going to lose the battle. If you want to look at it the other way, you could say, well, no, he said, I'm going to hand over the army and Israel to the Philistines. But at the end of the day, not only was the army not in the hands of the Philistines, neither was Israel. The men of Jabesh Gilead were in such a strong position, they went back, rallied against Saul's forces and rallied against the Philistine forces and took back the body of King Saul and his sons. In no way, shape, or form was Israel handed over that day. So you can go one of 2 ways with this. If you think, demon, well then what did the demon do?
He lied.
He lied. Lied, but like he does, close enough to the truth that it becomes a self-fulfilling truth. And it led Saul, in that moment on Mount Gilboa, to a place of great despair. And he ended up doing what demons and the devil want us to do, which is kill ourselves. Right? That could be one ending. The other one would say, well, God allowed Samuel to come back like Moses and Elijah on the Mount of Transfiguration, and this was one last act of grace by God to King Saul, trying to call him back. There's not a lot of grace in that message, but then you'd have to say, okay, so the Saul's message then was, you and your sons are going to die, and he meant you and the sons that are with you. And Israel's army is going to be handed over, and he meant by that, the bodyguard's going to go. Basically, the Israeli army or the Israel army lost, and then so you have to read them each a little bit differently. And I think you can leave this place today believing one or two. I don't know that the Bible necessarily answers that. The only reason I focus probably myself more on 1 is because the words that Samuel spoke led Saul to despair and to kill himself finally. And that doesn't seem in concert with the work of God sending a messenger of grace. The only other reason I would say that is Samuel sent by God. I don't see God allowing someone to use a medium and think that was controlling God's work and God's will. But if you do, we can still be friends. The Bible doesn't answer that for us. Sharon and Robert.
Just a quick question. Since you read it in Hebrew, are there any other words or meanings that come from Hebrew?
Read it in Hebrew, and I think you still come back to, this is what we call an exegetical question, that you can take a look at, when you take a look at an exegetical question, you say the text could mean one of these 2 things, and you have to then marshal the rest of Scripture around it. But at the same point, if it's an exegetical question, I think you never want to say, well, this is a point of faith, and you're absolutely wrong, and you're sinful for having this idea. I think good Bible-believing Christians could fall on either one of these things, because neither one is an airtight case, I don't think. But for me, I would lean towards number 1, but if you lean towards number 2, that's okay. We're going to close by taking a look at the lament that David wrote on hearing the death of King Saul. It's called the Lament of the Bow. Your glory, O Israel, lies slain on your heights. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath. Proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines be glad. O mountains of Gilboa, may you have neither dew nor rain, nor fields that yield offerings of grain. For there the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul, no longer rubbed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the flesh of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back, the sword of Saul did not return unsatisfied. Saul and Jonathan, in life they were loved and gracious. In death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep for Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and finery, who adorned your garments with ornaments of gold. Jonathan lies slain on your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. How the mighty have fallen. The weapons of war have perished. Next week, David is king. Thank you.
What's up, Alex? How much? Fantastic. How are you? Doing great.
To use the auger, I tried to use his auger. So it goes down and it bites.